people very confused thinking, well, is Bitcoin a currency competing with the dollar? Or is Bitcoin something different, a store of value competing with gold? And then is Bitcoin competing with Trump coin or any other token or not? I think the last 2 weeks have been extraordinary for Bitcoin and for the strategic Bitcoin reserve because momentum is really building. I think Friday night after that summit, I think the most important thing said in this industry in 4 years was said Friday night, and I think it missed a lot of people's attention. I don't think people really realized what happened.
마이클 세일러는 미국의 기업 가이자 투자자로 소프트웨어 회사 마이크로스트레티지의 공동 창립자이자 회장입니다. 특히 비트코인 강력한 옹호자로 유명하며 2020년부터 마이크로스트레티지를 통해 대규모 비트코인 투자를 주도했습니다. 이런 그가 지금은 전통 금융과 암호화폐 산업이 충돌하는 전환기라고 얘기하며 스테이블 코인의 중요성과 함께 디지털 자산의 분류 체계를 확실해지면 비트코인은 더 이상 불안정한 투기 자산이 아닌 제도권 자산으로 자리 잡을 수 있다고 얘기합니다.
You can understand Bitcoin as digital capital. It is the asset without the issuer. If it's digital capital, then it's going to grow to a $200 trillion plus network over time. And the value to the United States is anywhere from $3 trillion to $100 trillion if the US begins to acquire that network. As digital capital, it can negate or retire the national debt, or it can convert us from owing 40 trillion to owning 40 trillion of net assets. So I've been watching the industry for the past 4 years or so. And I think there's been a lot of confusion, a lot of controversy, a lot of conflict, and confrontation that was all unnecessary. And it was unnecessary because of a sort of a lack of vision and a lack of creativity amongst the policy makers and the participants. So, for example, in a world where the only assets that exist are securities and commodities, and in a world where it's impossible for any innovator to issue a security, then everything has to be a commodity. And that means a token is a commodity, a currency is a commodity, a tokenized security is a commodity, and a commodity is a commodity. So what we had was people very confused thinking, well, is Bitcoin a currency competing with the dollar? Or is Bitcoin something different, a store of value competing with gold? And so I think the crypto industry was at odds. A lot of people that want to be issuers of tokens are forced to go through this kabuki dance of pretending they're decentralized when they don't really want to be decentralized. What they want to do is access the capital markets, and they haven't had a way to do it, and we haven't had that discussion. So in my framework that I've laid out, and this is after hundreds of meetings and talking to people in the Senate, in the House, in the SEC, in the CFTC, in the White House, every industry participant, all the Bitcoin investors, all the crypto investors, all the crypto exchanges, all the policymakers. After lots of conversations and after listening to every word uttered by Gensler, by all the regulators, after listening to every minute of congressional testimony, here's my opinion. My opinion is the industry will move forward in a cheerful, constructive way with the greatest good done for the greatest number of people on Earth if we define 4 new asset classes. And they would be a digital token, a digital security, a digital currency, and a digital commodity. And trying to deal with changing the definition of currencies issued by nation state, that's too jarring. So the right way to handle this is simply to say, we want to allow digital tokens to be issued by 400 million businesses, ideally in 4 hours for $40, right? And what's the use case of a digital token? It's for capital creation and for innovation. So let Trump coin be issued, let Katy Perry token or Joe Rogan coin or any token, whether it's a smart contract token or a utility token or a meme coin. You know, the debate for the past 4 years was, well, if you want to be an issuer, then you have to register with the SEC. And then, of course, it's illegal to trade. Okay, that doesn't work. I think that if you go to digital currency, the real point is, an issuer, a corporation, whether it's Circle or Tether or a bank, ought to be able to issue a digital asset that's backed by currency. So if I want to sell $1 billion of digital stable coin, I ought to have $1 billion worth of currency in a bank. It ought to be one for one backed, right? And that's not the same as a stable coin. Like, it's not UST backed by Luna, right? It's not, that would be a token, by the way, right? If you create a token which you purport to be stable at $1, I mean, okay, you're kind of a fool to trust it. But if I create a digital currency, then I issue $10 billion and I buy $10 billion of treasuries, and it ought to be sort of a regulated entity. And the issuer ought to be liable to the government and ought to be liable to the buyer for fraud, right? And that's kind of very straightforward. But then the digital currency ought to circulate friction-free at the speed of light. And the benefit of that is that the stablecoin industry will go from 50 billion in the US to 10 trillion. And we will export $10 trillion worth of US dollars to the rest of the world. And probably everybody in Africa and everybody in Asia will start using the dollars. Maybe the Europeans will flip to the dollar, right? It would be great for the world's reserve currency. And so, and it would be great for the 8 billion people on the planet that have to use a defective currency as a medium of exchange or a short-term store of value. Because if you think about money, money decomposes into currency and capital. So if you live in Argentina and by law you're required to pay your tax bill in pesos, you're going to need ARS. You're going to need local currency. And if the currency is losing 20, 30, 40% of its value a year, then you would hold that for 4 weeks. Then if you needed money for the next 4 weeks to 4 years, call that midterm money, you'd probably want to buy the dollar. But if you need to hold the money from 4 years to 400 years, there is no institution or wealthy individual that would ever claim that the majority of their assets are held in dollars. Think about all the wealthiest people in the world: Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. What percentage of their wealth is US dollars? It's not even 1%. So Bitcoin doesn't compete with the dollar. Bitcoin competes with capital assets in the world, right? And there are $450 trillion of those capital assets. If you look at the M2 money supply, I think the US dollar was showing as like 13, maybe 17% of that. And the primary competitors of the dollar are CNY, Euro, and JPY, Yen, Euro, and Chinese currency. So as the stable coin, as the digital currency backed by the dollar starts to circulate, that number is going to go from 17% to 30%, right? And what we're doing is we're really competing with other world currencies. And then the Bitcoin asset is less than 1%. And as it grows, if Bitcoin goes to $13 million a coin, then Bitcoin will go from 0.5% or 20, 30 basis points of the world's capital assets to 13% of the world's capital assets. It will still compete with real estate, equity, and bonds, but it will emerge as like a monetary index for long-term money.
마이클 세일러는 실물 자산 담보의 디지털 통화가 활성화되면 미국은 10조 달러 규모의 달러를 세계에 수출하게 되고 전 세계 사람들은 비효율적인 자국 통화 대신 디지털 달러를 사용하게 될 것이라 전망합니다. 그리고 비트코인은 달러와 경쟁하는 통화가 아니라 전 세계 자본 자산과 경쟁하는 디지털 자본이라고 주장하며 장기적으로는 비트코인이 전 세계 자본 자산의 13%까지 차지할 수 있는 잠재력을 갖고 있다고 보고 있습니다. 우리는 객관적인 시각으로 투자를 해야 하고 지금 당장만 보고 투자할 게 아니라 미래를 보고 투자를 해야겠죠. 010-2472-0429 전화번호로 탈개미 적어서 문자 보내주시면 2025년 비트코인과 코인 시장에 대한 분석, 정보들 공유해드리겠습니다. 현재 우리에게 중요한 것은 이러한 정보를 어떻게 활용할 것인가입니다. 지금까지 영상 시청해주셔서 감사하고요. 다음에 더 좋은 영상으로 찾아뵙겠습니다. 감사합니다.